Well, hello everyone. Welcome to one of our last webinars of the year. We're super excited about this. I'm Sahil Cheney. I lead our customer success team here at Transcend. I've had the enormous pleasure of working with Stanley and Dave, who is a wastewater process engineer at Stanley for the past, Dave, I think it's been a year and a half now. It's been such a great journey, and today we're happy to share with you some of our learnings and some of the great things that we've done and hope to achieve moving forward. At any point in time, please feel free to add any questions in the chat or raise your hand. We do have moderators that'll be able to stop either Dave or I as we're speaking to be able to let you all ask any questions. So we definitely want to make this interactive and we want to make sure we answer as many questions as we can. And we'll, of course, make sure we have some time at the end. So before we start, for anybody who may not know much about Transcend, I always like to do a really quick spiel to tell you who we are. If you have questions at the end, feel free to put in the chat. And then what I'll do is I'll start us off. I'll share our screen, walk you through how Stanley and Transcend have worked together. Dave is going to give some concrete examples of projects that he's worked on. And then we're going to wrap up with some of the learnings and what to look forward to. Dave and the team, does that sound good?
Sounds good.
Great. And everyone can hear and see me okay?
Yeah.
Great. All right. So for everybody who may not be as familiar with Transcend, we are a generative design software, and we started out doing wastewater treatment plant design end to end. We were part of developed within an equipment manufacturing company that really wanted to be able to scale their design work. They just didn't have enough process engineers in the wastewater world to be able to go to market fast enough to show how their technology was beneficial and compares to other technologies within a plant. And then 3 years ago, there was so much demand that we made it into a separate company called Transcend. And we've been growing very fast in the last 3 years. Stanley actually was one of our first customers about 2.5 years ago now. And we've been partnering with them to be able to accelerate their wastewater process design, but especially at the early stages. So Transcend does early stage conceptual design that helps you evaluate different alternatives. So you may be doing some master planning. Your customer or the utility might be saying, okay, I want to be able to evaluate these different options. So normally that takes a lot of time. So we're not able to evaluate, a dozen options. You maybe do one or two. For example, you may have, different population growth. You may have you may have an industry coming in, but to be able to do permutation combinations of a variety of factors is very difficult because of how long it takes to do these designs. So Transcend, our goal is to make sure that at early stages of a project, engineers have as much flexibility as possible so that the design and the construction part of the process are successful and have good outcomes for our utility. And beyond, something we're going to talk about at the end towards the call. So we started with wastewater, but we're expanding into drinking water, industrial. You may have also seen us talk about electrical substation design. So our goal is to be able to do this across different infrastructure spaces. All right, I'm going to share my screen. Can everybody see the PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Okay, so we have Dave here and myself. I introduced myself. I'll have Dave introduce himself in just a second. So as I mentioned before, we've been working with Stanley for a couple of years now, and Dave really came in last year into the company and has taken the usage of Transcend at Stanley to the next level. And I'm really excited for you guys to hear how a real process engineer has used Transcend in his day-to-day. Dave, off to you.
Okay, my name is Dave Princehorn, and I'm a wastewater process engineer for Stanley Consultants in Phoenix, Arizona. And we've been using the Transcend software for the better part of about 1.5 years since I came to work. And I'm going to talk specifically about a couple of different projects that we've used it on to sort of bring you up to speed on what the software is capable of, tell you a little bit of information about your design inputs that you use, and the type of output and results that you get the final product. Back to you, Sahil.
Muted. Awesome. All right, Dave. Well, I think now would be a great chance I have your case study slides here. I know we talked about doing Pinewood. This is one of the first projects we worked together with Dave on. So he's going to walk through the process that he went through what parts he used Transcend for, and also what value it added into his day-to-day. A little tidbit here, we get asked all the time, well, if the software does this, then what am I supposed to do? But once you start using it, and I'm sure Dave is going to talk about it, it really does require your engineering mindset. And the goal of the software is to take away all the copy pasting and the repetitive work, so you can really focus on comparing options and identifying, risks, and be able to deliver great outcomes for your customers. So I'm really hoping that you all get to see that today, and with Dave presenting here.
Okay, so I'll take off now, give you a little information, background on the Pinewood wastewater treatment plant. Pinewood is a wastewater utility located about 20 miles south of Flagstaff, Arizona. It's in the high country, sits at about 6,000 feet roughly for elevation. They have an existing wastewater treatment plant that's permitted by the state of Arizona for 250,000 gallons per day of average daily flow. The plant can actually process about 600,000 gallons a day flow. But the problem we have in Pinewood, and it's been ongoing for decades up there, is they have high volumes of inflow and infiltration, especially during the spring snow melt and thaw. And also we have high intensity rainfall events in Arizona in the summertime called monsoon storm. And the monsoon storms can typically dump 2, 3, 4 inches of rain in a single event. The upstream watershed for Pinewood is relatively large, and so we get a lot of water moving down washes. And in these washes, we actually historically have constructed wastewater collection systems with manhole lids and things like that. So as these storm events and these melt events happen, aging pipelines and aging manholes have a tendency to leak pretty badly, and the treatment plant can actually get inundated with as much as 1.2 million gallons a day of dilute wastewater flow coming to the plant. Well, that obviously outpaces the capacity. And so what ends up happening is the plant becomes overwhelmed and we get surface water stream discharge directly. This becomes violation of NIPD's permits and aquifer protection permits, and it impacts downstream waterway adversely. This is a huge issue with the state of Arizona, and there's regulations to have this happen, but it just happened. So one of the things that Stanley is doing for Pinewood right now is we've gone in and we've assessed the upstream collection system. We have ongoing videotaping going on to determine where pipeline fractures and leaks and leaking manholes. We've started manhole rehabilitation and continued on a years-long process of manhole rehabilitation. But the collection system has so many lineal feet of pipeline that needs to be repaired that it doesn't stop the problem happening at the treatment. And so as a stopgap mechanism here, we're looking at doing some treatment plant upgrade. You can see in the slide that's presented to catch all this wastewater and stop this problem, to buy us enough time to fix the upstream collection. And so one of the things you'll see down near the bottom of this slide is a new flow equalization. We'd like to catch the flow before it hits the plant and slowly meter it off and process it in a managed way. The operations staff have indicated that they don't really like the existing screens that are in there. So we propose to put some new static screens in. The aerobic digester that's there currently is too small, and the Transcend calculations prove that up for us. And in having a small aerobic digester, you end up getting what I call constipation of treatment plant. You can't get the solids out of the plant fast to digest small. So we're looking to add an additional digester. Obviously, the influent pump station needs to be upgraded a little bit to handle the additional flows. And we have an existing basin there that can be used and converted into a new circular clarifier. They have clarifiers in the process already, but having a redundant clarifier would be a good backup for when we have these high flows, so get a better quality F. Now you can go to the next slide. So this is basically what I just told you. I talked about the I&I issues and the NIPD's permit violation. Since we had an existing plant and it's already permitted for 600,000, we took that information and we put it into the Transcend software. And we also ran process runs for the existing 250,000 gallons a day average daily flow and we ran a process calculation for the 1.2 million gallons of the I&I flow. And it was quickly determined that none of the process units in the plant were able to handle high ion flow value. We were able to confirm the sizing of the 600,000 gallon a day process for the aeration basins and the clarifiers. And that's when we saw the indication that aerobic digester. And so that was a driver for upsizing that. So the Transcend software indicated a problem in some of the original plant construction. We needed to resize that. But all the other things that were in the plant, resized, bioselector, clarifier. You can go to the next slide. So here I talked about the 3 runs. We did the 250,000 gallons a day, the 600,000 gallon a day current permitted plant capacity, and the 1.2 million gallons a day high I&I. We have to meet the current capacity to stay within state regulatory requirements. And because the plant can't handle the 1.2 million gallons a day, we have violated. And this particular plant has had so many violations that they're actually in consent order with the state. And the consent order says you must stop the high flow, must get back within permitted plant capacity and take care of this. And that's why we've been actively involved with the state. We've showed them the process calculation we've generated from Transcend. We've talked about our option of the flow equalization basin, and certain regulators get on board and say, well, the problem's not at the plant, the problem's in the collection system. Well, we recognize that, but the collection system problems are going to take 5 to 10 years to correct. And the treatment plant issue, we could take care of in about a year or maybe 2 years. Obviously, we could build a above ground 1.2 million gallon flow equalization in less than 1 year's time frame, and that automatically stops the high I&I that slams the plant and causes these discharges. So we're currently still working with the client to get some federal funding to help make all this happen. We're working closely with the state of Arizona to ensure that they're satisfied direct, and we're continuing an ongoing long-term master plan for the collection system. Ultimately, 5 years from now, all this should go away. The client will be back meeting regulatory and everything. Okay, you can go to the next slide. So when we ran the software, typically if we run multiple process iterations, it takes multiple days to come up with this. Using the Transcend software, I was able to run those 3 different versions of flow calculation and had the results the next morning. So I set it up in the afternoon and plugged in all the values, sent it to Transcend to run the software. It ran overnight. I came in the next morning and had complete reports ready to go for all 3 flow regimes that I was able to share in a pretty timely manner. The types of things that we get as outputs. Well, let me talk for just a second about the input and what I had to do to input. So the Transcend software asks you for various input parameters. It'll ask you for your average daily flow, your dry weather peak flow, your chemical oxygen demand, your biochemical oxygen demand, BOD, your total suspended solids or TSS, your TKN, your total kilojoule nitrogen. And so you input all that. You input your phosphorus value for your influent wastewater. You pick a minimum wastewater temperature that the plant would operate. In this particular case, it's in Fahrenheit degrees. It's 54 degrees. So in the wintertime up in the area near Flagstaff, it gets pretty cold. So your wastewater gets cold. So you have to input this lower wastewater operating, and then you input a upper wastewater operating temperature. In this case, it was 75. You input your regulatory effluent requirement. In this case, it was 30 milligrams per liter for BOD, 30 milligrams per liter for total suspended solids, 8 milligrams per liter for total nitrogen, 1 milligram phosphorus. So you input these values, and then you get the design reports back the next day. And the type of things you get back from Transcend in the report is you get a basis of design report. Basically, you get an equipment list of all the equipment process need. You get an instrumentation list that tells you all the instrumentation needed to run the process. It gives you an output to show you what your energy usage will be on the plant. It gives you a site plan, draws a site plan for you. It gives you a dimension site. It gives you isometric renderings that you can actually use in your proposal submittals to clients and show your clients these things. It cuts sections through the plant, and let's see what else. It gives you a technical description of how the plant works. And then probably one of the great things that engineers like are process flow. And so this actually cuts a process flow diagram for you. And those are used in almost every single design report that engineers submit to reg. So the software gives you this massive output of data that you can share with your client. You can share with the regulators and show them where things are going. It's generally conceptual to start with, and then you would refine this a little bit more once you work with the regulator client to fine tune. But incredibly powerful software. So I've used this for the Pinewood process, but we've also used it on 75 other wastewater treatment working on for a client there. And the nice thing about this is a bunch of these are small package plants on the order of 25,000 gallons a day. Can input the information, and I can have the results pretty much within about 2 hours. It doesn't run over the output results for these smaller back 2 hours. So we've used it on about 75 plants total so far. We have, I think that's about all I have on the Stanley side.
Sure. So we already have a question, Dave, from Tom. Anybody else, if you have any questions, feel free to add them in. I think this is a good time to pause before I move on to sort of the next, to wrap the webinar up. So the question, Dave, is that it sounds like the conceptual designs at the plant and the design generator have contributed to a somewhat iterative approach to the I&I investigations in the collection system. Has the software helped you steer towards any other decisions or considerations in the collection system as well as the plant?
Basically, what I think we get out of this is in identifying the plant problems, we're able to work with the client and see what the client can actually afford to repair. And so we were able to modify the master plan for the plant a little bit better to give them what they could afford. The software really is more for wastewater treatment and not so much for the upstream collection system. But having the treatment plant information allowed us the opportunity to work with the regulators and reinforce to them that even though they're kind of bringing the hammer down hard on us with a consent order, you need to fix your collection system. And they keep reiterating that. We have to push back a little bit and say, yes, we recognize that, but that's a multi-year process and we can't get out of a consent order just like that unless we do the treatment. And so by running the software, we're able to demonstrate that pretty clearly to the regulator, and they've kind of come around and they see where we're at. From all that, we took it back and we actually created a 5-year master plan and CIP for the entire system. I hope that helps answer your question.
Awesome. We have a few different questions coming in for Dave here. I can definitely bring up example designs of the Transcend outputs for everybody. That's no problem. I'm just going to pause sharing. We typically don't share, as you guys can imagine, per project designs, just for proprietary reasons for each customer. But I'll bring up some examples. But in the meantime, we have a bunch of other questions that came up, Dave. So while I bring up the output documents, maybe we can do those one by one. Does that sound good?
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So the first one is, can you set up limits or parameters for the funding available to match the cost of the design? And what are the limitations, possibilities of pricing through Transcend? I'm happy to answer that, Dave, and feel free to add to it as you see fit. And so just, Gina, we don't typically right now, the outputs give you quantities. So the equipment list, the civil bill of quantities, and customers typically take those quantities and then associate the pricing because of regional variabilities. We do have global customers. We are working on a pricing tool, so to allow you to say, okay, here's sort of some common prices for these, your OpEx or your key CapEx values that can help you compare in a bit more of an automated fashion the cost. But at the moment, it's quantities, so you can compare by quantity. So this one has 20% more concrete, or this one needs more blowers or larger blowers. So that's how the costing sort of proxies currently by quantity. The answers. Dave, anything to add on that side on the costing?
I don't have anything to add there, but I'm looking at some of the other questions here that people have come up with. I see that Gina has asked about actually seeing drawings and the output design of what Transcend provided. Example, I have a sample of one of the Louisiana projects in front of me in hard copy. I'm not sure how I can share my screen. Like,
if not, I can also bring up some examples, no problem.
Yeah, why don't you bring up some examples?
Give me a second.
While you're doing that, I can talk about some of the other questions here.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think Gina asked a question here about, can you set up limits parameters for the funding available cost design? I think Sahil maybe already answered that. You know, as well as I do, Gina, that, you know, clients have limited funds. And so maybe the way you would approach this, if you're looking at this, if you have an idea of what your client's funding is, go ahead and run the process calculations, determine all the treatment process units that maybe need to be resized or upgraded, and then work with the client on the priority ones, the ones that they can actually perform with the funding that they. But the nice thing is the software actually will size everything, and you can see what your existing plant is capable of doing or not being, and then you can focus more specific individual process. That's what I did with the Pinewood. We knew the plant could do 600,000 a day. Oh, but the aerobic digester couldn't. And so that real fast became one of the elements that needed taken care of. So by running the software, you can get all existing problems. Again, Gina, you asked a question, does Stanley typically use these for schematic level and then bring the rest of the design forward in-house, or does Transcend offer additional support after the initial design? Yes, the software and the output results we get initially are probably on a level of about 20 to 25%. That's real good if you're proposing on a wastewater treatment plant, put this kind of documentation in with your proposal. It shows that you've done your homework and you've gone forward and you're able to present something to the client to hopefully capture the project. As you capture the project, if you haven't used it for the proposals and you've got a client, in this case, Pinewood, who operate a plant, but they're not a real high-tech utility. It's really beneficial when you meet with their board, their operating board, to show them examples and visuals. Visuals go along, process flow diagram, the plant diagrams that actually show the layout and things like that. So you can show the management team these documents, and that's really highly beneficial. So yeah, it initially does it at a schematic level, and then ultimately Transfer will refine the software to be more of a full-blown process software, but we actually go on and we use some other spreadsheets to do final calculation. Do you have a rep for each project that you use to answer questions all through tech? I think that's going to be a question for Sahil. It has Transcend software. How do regulators respond to the use of software in lieu of traditional design practices? In Arizona, most of the work that's done here is all run through different types of software like BioWin, things like that anyway. So they're pretty forward thinking here. And so seeing output results and calculations and all the stuff we get in Transcend data output here, we don't have any trouble with regulators here. I don't know if other states are stringent. Again, that might be a question for where Transcend is off. I think that's all the questions. I back up to Gina's first one about an output of what Transcend looks like. And that now it's going to go back to Sahil because you've got that up on the screen.
Absolutely. I'm showing a sample here that we ran in our demo instance. So here's what you're seeing is a rendering. So we do use Revit, which is an Autodesk product. You may have seen that we have a partnership with Autodesk. And for that, the way it works is, as you saw from Dave's drawing of the plant, he's like, okay, new aerobic digester. So what he did in Transcend was drew that site within Transcend using Google Maps exactly how you saw it. And you can essentially mark out, okay, don't want anything to be built here. I want things to be, the biological area to be in this area. So this big gray area you see here is a no build zone, as we say. So there's utilities or buildings there that the client didn't want to remove. This is an MBBR facility. But I just want to show you'll be able to see everything in gray is the existing plant, and everything in white, or the lighter color, is new capacity that is required. So as Dave mentioned, you put in your input, you put in what the effluent quality is, and you put in your flow influent, and then the software will say, all right, this is what we you have coming in, this is what you need you have coming out, here's the size of facility that you, and so that's what Dave was talking about in terms of the sizing of all the different pieces of the plant and its end to end. And he also mentioned all the other types of documents. The process scheme, I know, is a big one for process engineers. So you'll actually see in here all the different portions of the process scheme and all the different parts of the facility. We have the equipment list, which gives you an idea of all the different equipment that's required for that facility, new equipment. So it'll tell you how much new equipment you need. And then based on that equipment, we have a load list that'll be able to tell you the electrical load for oh, sorry, that's going too fast. Electrical load for that facility. We also have an OpEx document. So this gives you an idea of overall cost to operate the facility. So in terms of your costing, Gina, you have the numbers, and then you'd be able to say, okay, what is electricity cost in this specific area, and be able to do that analysis. So we do provide an overview of the chemicals, the polymers, and the waste for that plant as a whole. The technical description is the key process document. So it really goes through the entire plant and describes every single part of the facility, and gives you all the process variables that you would need to put in your report. So for example, you would have a design basis, so all the influent and effluent characteristics that you would input. And then you would have here the core screens, fine screens, you would have the grit removal, primary clarifiers. If you choose for in this case, MBBR, you have all the different process variables that you would need to evaluate the facility, the air demand, if you're doing chemical phosphorus removal, how much chemical you need, and as well as secondary clarifier specifications, and then the tertiary filtration. Tertiary treatment is the last part, that treatment, and then we do have the sludge line as an overview, so you will be able to have some information on the sludge, especially if you choose to run it with an anaerobic digester. And then I'll also show the civil BOQ. So this is where you have all the concrete quantities that, again, you can also use for cost. If there's any other questions on the input?
We have one question in the chat
okay.
from Chris, and he says, what range of options does Transcend have for aeration for activated sludge plants? And are there different membrane types?
Thank you, Chris. Are those, I believe those are two different questions. Yes. So in terms of, and Dave, I don't know if you want to kind of take a stab at what types you've used first, and then I can answer as well.
Yeah, there's conventional activated sludge. We've used that. That seems to be what the Pinewood plant was. But I know that you guys also have some membrane modules that are available as well. I know that we have sequencing batch reactors are in there. That's another type of activated sludge. So I think, Sahil, do you have something you can illustrate the different types of treatment processes that are available right now? I think we have about half a dozen or so, at least, maybe.
Yes, so we do have our key secondary treatment are activated sludge, SBR, MBR, MBBR, and IFAS are the 5 that we currently have in the system. In terms of aeration, we have an equipment database where, based on what you've provided, we would select what equipment you would need. And without it's kind of brand agnostic. So we would select, and you would see that in the equipment list, as well as all in the technical description, what the air demand. I don't know if that answers your question, Chris. Feel free to ask a follow-up. One thing too to note, I don't have like a list of all the different processes, but we do have a free sort of login so all of you guys can go in, log in, and try out the tool. You get to see all the different options. We do have a lot. So, we have primary treatment, we have secondary treatment. So you'll be able to see all the different options in the tool and be able to play around with it. So we will send over the link to that even as a follow-up. And in terms of yes, Chris, for the membranes, we have a sort of basic, I don't want to say basic, what we call is our base platform. So everything that you'll see when you all log in is what we call publicly available literature. It's based on publicly available literature. So Metcalf and Eddy, WEF papers. So in terms of the membrane bioreactors, we have the Suez, ZWeed, the Puron, and the Memstar are the 3 different options that we currently have. But for for each customer, we're able to configure that to be more specific. So we do have different options for members as well. Awesome. Any other questions? Stop sharing. No? All right. So one last thing I wanted to present today was we do have some exciting stuff coming up in TDG. And so I wanted to kind of walk through that with everyone really quickly. And a lot of it is because of great feedback from customers like Dave. So we have always continuous improvement of and updates in our wastewater process unit. So we're working on revamping our PNIDs and as well as with our partnership with Autodesk to have smart PNIDs. We have a partnership with Narita, with Royal Haskell DHV to add that technology as another secondary treatment option. As well, we're hearing more and more about carbon footprints and being able to compare options based on their carbon. So that is going to also be something that we're working on. So this is all things that are upcoming in 2023. We're also next year working on wastewater treatment. So all of you folks that do both municipal and industrial, this is probably very interesting for you. We're doing sort of starting with brewery, potato, food and beverage type stuff. We have drinking water designs. We're improving our BIM capabilities. And this is the one that I know Dave is close to Dave's heart, is the wastewater lift station. That's one of the things that we've heard a lot from, is helping with the collection and distribution. So working on that, and then also reuse facilities. And if you all follow us on LinkedIn, you probably also see that we have electrical substation design as well. Awesome. Any questions? Last question, comments from anybody? Feel free to put it in the chat and the Q&A. I'll stick around for a couple minutes.
We did have one question that I don't think we had answered yet from Gina that says, do you have a rep for each project that you use to answer questions, or is it typically done through technical support?
Thanks, Nicole. I think with the sharing, we went away from that question a little bit. So we usually, you have a dedicated customer success manager when you are working with Transcend. So you go through one person. However, we have an entire team of experts. So Dave has worked with our wastewater process engineers very often, discussing the approach, discussing the project, how best to use Transcend for that project. So we provide a lot of support, not just technical support, but a lot of sort of strategy support as well. Dave, I don't know if you want to speak to that. I know you've spoken a lot to our team as well.
Initially when we first started using the software, it was important for your process engineers to understand the type of results and outputs and so I worked a lot with Imre, who's one of the lead process engineers overseas, and we had weekly meetings and discussed what we needed and how to move forward. And him and I worked back and forth for several weeks to continue to modify the software to get the type of results that we're going to be best for our. So Transcend is real easy to work with in getting you to the goal line where you need. And one of the other things that's come up recently is all these little plants I have in Louisiana. They're small package plants. They run at about 25,000 gallons a day. And here in fairly short order, I think this week or next week, Transcend is modifying the basic software pack to actually take flows down as low as 26,000 gallons a day. So for you individuals working in more rural areas or smaller communities that have smaller flows, the software will now be able to go down to those smaller levels. That's huge when you're dealing with package plants, small subdivisions like that. So like I say, my experience working with all the Transcend folks has just been outstanding. I think as you get involved with these guys, you'll see that they're there to help you succeed. That's what we need.
Thank you so much, Dave. It's been such a pleasure working with you, and excited to see all the projects we work on moving forward. Nicole and Remy, I know we'll leave it off to you guys to wrap up.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. We will be following up with the recording. And if you have any questions, feel free to email us. There's also a link to register for free design in the chat. Thanks to Helen, Dave.
Thank you all so much. Thank you so much, Dave.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for attending. I hope you have good luck and success in the future with all your endeavors. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.